very much. Yeah, Scotland, the education departments are obsessed with what they call the Scots language. And, I'm not interested in class or anything like that. Anyway, I'll read up. I did some translations of well, I did a translation of Mother Courage a couple of years ago, in which Mother Courage was written around a sort of West of Scotland working class voice. Just like, well, Glasgow's a North European port like Hamburg, and I was reading about it, it's supposed to be sort of non-standard Hamburg Germans. I thought, oh, well, I'm in. So, anyway, this is the Song of the Great Capitulation. Once in years gone by, in my springtime bloom, I fancied that I'd have it all my own sweet way and time. I wasn't just your average woman for a single end. I had my looks, I was sharp as a tack, and had my sights aimed high. And I'd not take shit if my suit contained a hair. Right away they had to change the plate, or else. It's absolutely all or nothing. Second best is not an option. You get what you fight for. You have to make your own rules. But a birdie tweet in my ear. Psst, in the year, you'll keep in step like all the rest. Parade in time, there'll be a pest. You'll tootle away your own wee tune. March up and down. Right turn, your mates and all. They'll say it's God's law, and you'll no say a thing. And afore a year I had failed the test, I'd swallowed down my medicine like all the rest. 2 veins round my ankles, a price of loaf sky high and all the rest of it. I was so done in, just feeling knackered all the time. Them in charge, they had me by the short and curlies. You have to get by with other folk. One hand washes the other, and it's no use banging your head against a brick wall. And a birdie tweet in my ear. Psst, in the year, you'll keep in step like all the rest. Parade in time, there'll be a pest. You'll tootle away your own wee tune. March up and down. Right turn, your mates and all. They'll say it's God's law, and you'll no say a thing. I have seen some folk the heavens above they'd storm. There's no a star they think too big or just too far away. If you've talent, you'll rise. When there's a will, there's a way. Anybody can make it to the top. But I'll tell you this, if you set off up icy mountain peaks, and you'll find a wee straw hat is no enough. You have to make out in life with what you've got. And a birdie tweet in my ear. Psst, in the year, you'll keep in step like all the rest. Parade in time, there'll be a pest. You'll tootle away your own wee tune. March up and down. Right turn, your mates and all. They'll say it's God's law, and you'll no say a thing. Another couple of, just give a couple of sort of short songs. But when I was composing it, I had Paul Deslow's music on iTunes in my head so that I could get the syllables to correspond and all that stuff. But I can't, I'll just read it. This is a wee thing from scene 7. For all the talk of war and glory, great victories won, don't kid yourself. War's nothing but a bit of business that deals in cheese and boots as well. Some folk will look for quiet quarters, a place to settle down they crave. They want to dig their house foundations instead they dig an early grave. Some rush about like bees out jam jars, a peaceful spot they're searching out. But once they're dead, I just wonder what the rush was all about. One of the things that, again, it was great working with the play, and also working with, I'm very thing about the word revolution. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, my revolution's to stay fucking safe from morning to night. Because, I don't mean that, I mean it's just to stay healthy, because the living room is nature's front line as far as I'm fucking concerned. Every time you put on the bloody wireless, you know. So it's a case of, well, I mean, I eventually did a thing on my website that was you know, because you can spend too much anger listening, you know, when you get habituated to the corporate news media one kind or another, and they all like something, journalists validate the politicians, and the politicians validate the journalists, so on and so forth. I eventually did this thing with just the news and put in, you know, a wee circumflex to make it their news. Above it would be ditch the construct, and underneath it turn the fucker off. Because it is just a construct, you know. Obviously. Anyway, right, I'll just move on. So, I read this thing called The Fair Cop. It's a few years ago. Lasts about 5 minutes. A cop came to see me, but I didn't know he was a cop. I'm so trusting. And I said, sit down and have a cup of tea. And he sat down and had a cup of tea. And he was a young man, a nice looking young man. He reminded me of my son, the taller of my sons. Very discreet, a good listener. And I said, would you like a banana? I eat bananas like a gorilla. But the cop didn't want a banana. He asked me if it was all right to use a dictaphone. And I said, of course, I don't really like dictaphones. And he was interested in all my life. And he wanted to get a few things straight that would help him with his work. And I'm getting old. The bits of me beginning to pack up and go. And I like helping the young. It is one of the pleasures of old age. What else is there for the old to do? So I told him all I could, and I was very free and honest. I like being free and honest. I like those days when it all comes together. And you know your own story, and you know your own place in the world, and what you've done and why. And he didn't say very much. Come to think of it, he didn't say very much at all. But he had a nice smile, and he seemed a good listener. So I talked, instructing the young on my path through life. And only once did his expression change somehow. Only once did his eyes sort of flicker. And that was when I was talking about terrorism. And how they all use the word terror now instead. And I told him, I noticed when the change first took place. I said, I remember it being Ariel Sharon. How he kept saying terror, 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 fighting terror, war on terror, fighting terror, war on terror. All instead of terrorism. And now the word's over here. And how this reminded me of the way words would change during the 70s. How news bulletins would change a word even in one day reporting Ireland. How the words in something would evolve to a kind of more acceptable slant. And I told them how I used to rant on then. I laughed. How I used to rant on then in the 70s and 80s. All this stuff about changing the laws for the Irish situation. How they would bring the Diplock courts over here when they felt they could. How they would find another emergency over here when it suited them. I was really relaxed talking to the young man. I know the story of this place. I grew up in it. I have eyes and ears. I try to find out different views. It's part of being free and honest. That's what I was so keen to tell him. It's not part of being a member of anything. It's just part of being alive. But there was something about that mention of terror Something about the way he reacted to me talking about it. Looking back, it was almost as if he was suddenly on the job. And his face changed just that wee bit. His eyes caught mine just for a second. But it was only a couple of days later, when I was up for the toilet in the middle of the night. I was up for my usual 4 o'clock pee, and I decided to have a cup of tea and a banana. And it suddenly dawned on me, just out of the blue, Jesus Christ, that cunt was a cop. That wasn't a nice young man looking for the wisdom of the old. That cunt was a cop. It's the war on terror. He was part of the war on terror. And that's why his eyes changed when I spoke about that. Of course, you can never really be sure of these things. You can't really tell, there's no way of knowing. Who can you trust? Can you trust anyone ever? There seems to be so much being spent on this war on terror. So much about how we need to have more secret police. How much we need more phone tapping. All the news about threats to the fabric of our society. How the whole world has been taken over. It makes me wonder just because I keep questioning it. I can't help it, it's just the way I am. I like to be free and honest. I hate language that isn't free and honest. That's just the truth of it. I can't put it any other way. And I keep opening my mouth and saying it. What else is there to do when you're growing old? You can't go to your grave without having said what you think. I suppose you just have to keep files on people like me. If I was one of them, I imagine I would. I'll read a few about the Glasgow poems I wrote between 69 and 79. I just wrote them again because I was angry because you kept seeing these cuddly versions of what people were supposed to be talking. Christ, we exist, you know. A summer's day. Your eyes are, put it this way, I think you're beautiful, like, fact, I think I love you, that's just the way it is, like, that's all there is to say. Moral philosophy. What do you mean? Listen to me talking to you, right? Hold on, where was I? No, aye, what's his name? In with it, you know you want. Here, you're not even listening. Name of God, I don't know. I sometimes do things with fonts like this, sort of thing, and Oxford Dictionary of and English language. And this is the poem, the one that went in the GCSE. My standard joke when I read it is, because every year for 10 years I was getting a few bob for them to print it in these educational things, you know. I'd say to Sonia, Christ, if I knew I'd make so much money out of that one, I'd have written one about the 1 o'clock news and all. This is the 6 o'clock news, the man said. The reason I talk with a BBC accent is because you wouldn't want me to talk about the truth with a voice like one of you, Scruff. If I talked about the truth like one of you, Scruff, you wouldn't think it was true. Just one of you, Scruff, talking. There's a right way to spell and a right way to talk it. This is me talking, your right way of spelling. This is my truth. Yous don't know the truth yourselves because you can't talk right. This is the 6 o'clock news. Belt up. After he'd given us a spiel about what was right and what was wrong, but this and that and the next thing, I says to the bloke, and what is it you call your job, Jimmy? I'm a liaison coordinator. He says, oh good. I says, a liaison coordinator. Just what this area needs. What with all the unemployment and all the bevying, and the boys running amok and the house is 40 bits, and the women in tranquilizers, at last they've sent us a liaison coordinator. Somebody with a degree in fuck knows what, getting paid for no knowing what the fuck to do with it. You sort of keep trying to avoid it, that's the difficult. Sorry. You sort of keep trying to avoid it, that's the difficult bit of it. Just keep finding yourself sitting, watching the telly or looking out the window. That way you say, Christ, I could go a wrong egg, or what's the time, fuck me, with nae cooking oil and we need potatoes. Listen, being a human being, or Mordecai van Unit, not to be complicit, not to accept everyone else is silent and must be all right, not to keep one's mouth shut to hold on to one's job, not to accept public language as cover and decoy, not to put friends and family before the rest of the world, not to say I am wrong when you know the government is wrong, not to be just a bought behaviour pattern, to accept the moment and fact of choice. I am a human being and I exist, a human being and a citizen of the world, responsible to that world and responsible for that world. I'll just end with reasonably particularly. I ended this book with 3 types of envoy, I call them. So I'll read the last 2. A humanist. And a very sort of statement, I know, formally, adventurous, I suppose. I don't know. The son of an immigrant, a humanist. The son of an immigrant, he had eschewed the culture of his father as also that of the land into which he was born. The religion of his father was once the religion of the indigenous natives, but they had rejected and overthrown it. And the son was yet seen as of that tribe which corroded the native culture and language. An outsider, he felt at home with the art and culture of other outsiders. For many years he found companionship across space and time. But from within he came to realise himself as instance of the universal human. The universal human is inclusive and absolute. There is no individual outside it. This sense of the universal human is a home of all those who have won through to become themselves. And much trouble in the world is caused by those who remain self-sequestered in their perceived province of the exclusive. Finally, a life. There were some who seemed to spend their lives being a writer, and he had spent his life not being a writer. That way lay safety and invisibility, a freedom. Those he met saw him as that writer, and would never understand that this was not how he had shown him to see himself. He accepted their seeing him as that writer, almost with a kind of irony. But then he began to accept that he was a writer. It was a matter of language and consciousness, the link between the two. He had to choose to accept the responsibility of the outer that he had preserved from himself, that he had left to the perception of others. For as he grew older, he stood in a separate relationship to himself. He was able to body himself conceptually as a totality. And though he had never been a storyteller, he saw that he had been telling a story all his life. It became important to him that somebody heard the story, now that he realised he had been telling it. Yet all that remained to be told was that he had been telling it. And all that remained was the need for the last understanding, the sign that someone had heard the story and the teller was no longer necessary.